pain that is not transformed is transmitted. Creating safe spaces for people to feel and heal. That's what we're doing.
If there were mirrors of you and if there were tons of you around the world, I think the world would be a much more harmonious place to feel in. Thank you. Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various social and environmental global issues and on how we can help. Today, I'm speaking with author and peace activist Nitsan Joy Gordon, who presents her unique perspective on a millennium-old conflict, conquering Jerusalem. Nitsan is a peace activist, a group facilitator, a therapist, and a storyteller. She's a mother and the author of Together Beyond Words, Women on a Quest for Peace in the Middle East. Essential early life experiences that contributed to her future path were growing up in an Israeli border kibbutz fraught with danger and violent skirmishes. She was subject to hatred in the American South, being the only Jewish person in her junior high school. But on a better note, Nitsan discovered dance as a way to work through her trauma, a coping mechanism, and road to recovery and healing. And so 30 years ago, she began on a quest to train and empower women and men as peace builders to transform prejudices between religions and, most importantly, between Israelis and Palestinians. In 2003, she co-founded Together Beyond Words, a peace-building nonprofit that brings Muslims, Jews, Bedouins, Jews, and Christians together in a dynamic process to heal ancient wounds, recover hidden strengths, and promote emotional understanding. This groundbreaking approach teaches participants to harness conflict and intense emotions as a way to achieve empathy and deep connection with perceived enemies. Nitsan, hello, and welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I want to start with the dire situation in Israel and what you are experiencing through the horrible series of events since the tragedy on October 7th.
So in our organization, we have a playback theater group, and it's composed of Arab and Jewish women. And just a small example of what I'm experiencing is last night, I went to visit one of the Palestinian women in our playback theater, and she's celebrating Christmas over the next 2 days, and I came to be with her and just sit with her and hear what she's going through. And she spoke about her immense pain, about what's going on in Gaza. And then this morning, just as I opened the news, there were 8 soldiers who were killed in the war, and one of them is a friend of one of the other actresses who's Jewish. And so since the beginning, because of the kind of work that we're doing, which is creating safe spaces for people to bring everything that they're feeling, all I can say is that I've been feeling so much pain and heartache and heartbreak, and hearing from so many people how hard it is for them. And I live like 9 kilometers from the border with Lebanon, which is really close. In the beginning, we were afraid that the Hezbollah would send people like the Hamas had sent in the south to just come into our communities and, kidnap and massacre. And we were really scared to come out of our houses. And there's been sirens, we've been hiding, but amidst all this, what's important to me right now is that just to make sure that people who are in trauma, which is basically everybody, to have a space where they can just share what they're feeling, so they're not hurting all the time, so they can connect to other people, so somebody can hold their hand and hug them and hear them cry and scream. That's what I'm doing. That's what's important to me. And sometimes, Ali, it's just really, really painful.
It must be. I mean, for many people, it is something that we are compassionate, and we try to feel what you're going through and in the space that you're going through. But really, we view this vicariously through you. I mean, I sense your emotion and what is going on with yourself and with your group and with your friends and others who I've met through you as well and spoken with. But really, it's very difficult to say, I feel what you're feeling, because nobody should feel what you guys are going through. In Israel today, in general, on all sides, every mother, every child, everybody who's being involved in this nonsensical situation. But see, in this chaos, a huge crisis is developing with even scarier consequences. But voices like you, these lights, these hopes, these little plants that come out of the rocks, and they will not be told no. These voices, they are voices of opportunity. You hold the belief that these moments are moments of opportunity, and as you say, a crack where the light can come in. So what you hear everywhere since October 7, I know you hear distraught, I know you hear hopelessness, I know you hear fear, I know you hear a lot of negativity and a lot of difficulty, but are you hearing what you're believing in opportunity? Are you hearing voices of people saying, there must be a way through the darkness?
Yes, there's more and more voices like this now. We're paying a huge price for this war, and whereas in the beginning, people were just some people were just wanting to go out into Gaza and pay the Hamas back. Now so many people are in pain and seeing the pain on the other side, and so many soldiers, like 460 soldiers have been killed and so many wounded, and the hostages who've been there for 79 days, and still there's 129 hostages. And seeing the pictures of come out of Gaza, and the children and the women and the people who are not the Hamas and are paying such a terrible, terrible price. Mm-hmm. Just people are in heartache, and they feel like something needs to be done that's different, something outside the box, something that we haven't done before. Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing voices like that around me and in the media, and definitely.
Okay. Which is good in a sense. And from your perspective, what do you believe can ignite peace? You introduce the roles of emotion as the catalyst to transform pain, to prevent transmission, right, of this pain. And that is a bulk of what you bring to the table and through your work. So, what do you believe can ignite peace? You know how you say that everybody's looking for that one thing that we haven't done, that one thing that we should be doing, that new element to bring to the table here. What is that? How do you ignite that?
I think there's many. I'll tell you about mine.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I have a desire to go to the core of what, okay, it's about territory, and it's about many other geopolitical, topographical, demographical issues. But we also have the ability to live in peace with each other, which is happening all around the world. So it's not a impossible concept. And I'm asking, what is it that is preventing us from doing it here? What is it that I can, and the people I work with can change and contribute and do differently? And at the time when we first spoke, I said, I believe, or we believe, that pain that is not transformed is transmitted. It's very simple. People know it. Like when you're in emotional pain, when you suffered something, if there's no space for you to do the work or to just give compassion to that place inside you that's suffering, or to have somebody listen to you and acknowledge your pain, if you don't have that, then it stays inside. And research has been done about how our emotions influence our decision making and influence the way we act in the world and the way we behave and everything that we do. So you have these people, for example, in Israel and Palestine, who came from the Holocaust and who went through the Nakba, and who are holding all this pain that had no room. Nobody sat and listened to them. Nobody enabled them to share and cry and get angry about what happened to them. They just had to live and push it in. And, the bad news is it doesn't work, because that pain then affects the way we behave in the world. And that's what we see all around us, people acting out their pain. So I'm saying right now, in this moment, this is the work we've been doing for 30 years on a small scale. But right now, in this very moment, when so many people are in trauma, and so many people are feeling their pain and have a reason to want to have support and to have community and to have other people helping them hold it. This is the time. It's a window of opportunity to come in with what I like to call an army of healers, and create circles of healing all around the country, all around Israel, all around Palestine, circles of healing where people can share their pain, so that the cycle that's been going on for, well, according to you, for 2,000 years or 2,500 years or for whatever, but I'm just looking at the last 75 years, so we can come in and do some kind of intervention that would change the course of history. It's no less than that, Ali. Mm-hmm. This is huge.
It is indeed. And like you said, 30 years pushing for peace by yourself and others. And I want to start for our audience to understand better where you're coming from. I want to start with your own story of courage and resilience and compassion to be able to face this and to take action essentially around this. What influenced the creation and the development of the person you are today from so many different avenues that you could have taken in life? And going back to your childhood stories, to your brief time in the US and other experiences that you've had that developed the persona that you have. And especially, I know there's a moment with a Muslim woman, Miriam, which was a turning point of sorts for you as well. So can you give us a brief history of, Nissan growing up?
Nitsan Joy Gordon. By the way, I added joy to my name just so I could see it and feel more joy in my life.
and that's beautiful. That's how names should be.
Thank you. So I was born in a border kibbutz, as you said earlier, in the border with Jordan. And during the 1967 war, I'm 7 years old, and a little girl in an underground shelter. My father is the commander in the kibbutz because he's the only officer, and he comes in the middle of the fighting where some of my friends, one of my friends' fathers was killed and a few others were badly wounded. And he comes to see me, my father, and see how I'm doing. Because my mother is in another underground shelter with my little brother. And I'm really confused because I can't understand, why is this happening? Why are the Arabs shooting at us, killing? What's going on? Are they bad people? And so he's like, he's with his Uzi rifle on him, and his face is like full of mud, and he's like just come from the fighting, and his friends have been killed. And he says, no, not all the Arabs are bad people. Not all just like us, there's good and there's bad. And the ones fighting us are bad, but there's so many others like us who want to live in peace. And so I know as a little girl, I must have wanted something more along the, good and evil, black and white. And no, that's not what he gave me. He gave me the complex, more difficult response. No, there's good people on both sides. And later it was like, there's something that can be done to create bridges. So that was the beginning, or something I remember as the beginning. And then when I was 10, we moved to the United States. We lived right above the city of Chattanooga, Tennessee, in a little mountain community called Signal Mountain. And there was no Jews there. And by the way, there were no blacks either. A few blacks tried to move to Signal Mountain, and their houses were burned down. And there was no Black Lives Matter, and it was a different period. And, but I thought to myself, well, I'm not Black, so I'm 10 years old, people are going to treat me nicely and whatever, I'm 11. And as soon as they found out I'm Jewish, I started getting teased and called names. And at the cafeteria, I would sit and they would throw food at me and say, look at that dirty Jew, look how she eats. And then one day in history class, the teacher was teaching about the Holocaust. And two students sitting next to me, Betsy and Dickie, were starting to whisper in my ear how good it is that all the Jews died in the Holocaust, and too bad that I wasn't killed too. And so in the beginning, I tried to ignore them like I did when, food was thrown and whatever, because I was alone, the only Jew. But then they kept going on. You know how children sometimes kind of try to get a reaction. Well, they kept going and going and going and saying, how good it is that so many Jews were murdered, until I couldn't take it anymore. Like my body was like, and I just stood up and I cried, enough! And I just ran out of the room. I ran like, I don't know, maybe 2 miles all the way home. And that was the first time I told my parents about this experience, about what I'd been going through for 1.5 years, basically. I don't know why I didn't tell them before, but then I told them. And the next day, my father came to the classroom. And I think I might have thought that he would stand out there and lecture them. How can you do this to my daughter? You're so... But he didn't. I'm reminding you, it's the same man who remembered in the middle of the war. He didn't. What he did was he told them a story from the Holocaust, a story of courage, of people supporting each other. And, I can tell you the story, but then maybe you won't read my book. But yeah, he told them a story, and they were spellbound. They were listening to him, and I was too. I hadn't heard the story before. And then he thanked them, and he left the room. And I think from that moment, something about the load I was carrying, the pain, the feeling that I was, different. Something had changed. I can't even explain it, but maybe the way I was treated, something changed, and it became easier. People connected to me better. And so,
from there?
Hmm?
And from there?
From there, I went back to Israel. I finished high school, went to the military where I served as a teacher for 2 years. And then I went to study psychology and then dance therapy. As you said before in the introduction, what helped me during those years when I was experiencing prejudice was that I began dancing. And through the dancing, I expressed my feelings. It was a place where I could just really bring everything, all of me, and be accepted. And so after psychology, I went to study dance therapy, and I wrote my master thesis on how dance movement therapy can help heal prejudices. And then I went back to Israel. And a few months after I returned, my father gave me a book that he had written about a dialogue program he had done. It's called Dance, Dialogue, and Despair, because his project ended in despair. At the war, the First Lebanon War began, and his groups fell apart. My father didn't know how to work with people's emotions. So when things got hard, they really didn't know how to handle it. So he said, give this book to Dr. Maria Mari in Akko as a gift, because she had written an article for another book of his. So I went and met her and gave her the book. And she said, why don't you come work with us? I have a school here for kindergarten teachers. You can teach them dance therapy or how to use movement in their classrooms. That would be wonderful. And I did. And a few years later, Alan Slivka from the Abraham Fund approached Dr. Maria Mari and said to her, why don't you do something for coexistence? You're doing such amazing work with teachers. With Arab teachers? Why don't you do something with Arab and Jewish teachers? And at first she said, no, we're not ready. First, we as Arabs have to feel good about our own traditions, our own culture. We've been living in Israel for so many years under the Israeli, under Israeli government, Jewish. Our schools have such an influence of the Jewish tradition. We want to feel good about who we are before real dialogue can begin and real coexistence. And but a year or two later, she said, okay, we're ready. Let's write a proposal. And I wrote a grant proposal with her son. She's Muslim, the first Muslim woman to receive a doctorate degree in Israel. So I wrote the grant proposal, and we received funding from the Abraham Fund. And we started our first group of kindergarten teachers, Arab and Jewish. And that's where our work began. From I think it was in 1995, 1996, our first group. Today's what, to 2023, almost 2024, almost 30 years.
A long time indeed. And almost, when you refer to this part of the conflict, the 75 years, you're talking about almost half of that time being involved in some kind of peace building, as you say, and starting this and working through it. Now, developing the program, developing your path, I want to know, obviously there was trauma from your childhood. I mean, just the brief 2 episodes of the school and being in the shelter, there must be trauma from there. How did you unpack things for yourself in order to be able to lead and to be able to develop what you have and to support the community? Because often many people who go through trauma and maybe have PTSD or complex PTSD or any different sorts of mental health issues that rise from there. At best, we're happy when they're able to heal themselves, if that, because many don't, and many succumb to many different ways to dealing and coping with it, from addictions and drugs to alcoholism to violence and all. But some people come through, and some people have the resilience and they fight through and they push on. And I've spoken to many people who have been through traumatic situations in their personal lives who have succeeded. But rarely do I meet somebody who not only succeeds, but also takes that succession, takes that path and says, I know how to do this, and I'm going to transform this in my community so that this problem and this issue does not transmit continuously and generationally, hopefully beyond me, because I will be able to support this. Tell me how you dealt with the trauma and how you hope that this method will be able to do the same for the people going through this conflict.
Great question. First of all, I realized that the experience I had at some point, I realized the experience I had with prejudice is not something I want anyone else to experience. It's very painful, and I just want, and there's so much of it, and I just wanted to find a way to shift it, to heal prejudices. I wanted to understand them first and then to heal them if possible. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that this is the kind of home I grew up in. I grew up in a home where there was a lot all the time. In the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, there's a verse that says, justice, justice, thou shalt pursue. And the same for peace. And justice and peace is not something that will just happen. You have to pursue it. And this is what I learned from the way my parents were, from those around them and around me, that it's something, if I want to change something, I have to do something. It's not just going to happen. And as I started doing it, I realized that this work was also my healing, being able to shift what other people were feeling required me to visit very painful emotions inside me. And then I could support other people in their journeys. So, does this answer your question?
This actually opens up a new question that will answer all the questions. And what you've explained is you're working through mechanisms that were able to support yourself and heal yourself, which you are now mirroring onto the community, essentially. And in this sense, what you're doing is groundbreaking in the sense that in a scientific sense, it's not, a vaccine, because there's no vaccine for these kind of issues. But in a scientific sense, at the same time, for me, from the way I, place logic and emotions into science, which aren't there in some of the sciences, but the way I look at things, I feel this is groundbreaking scientifically because it heals. So anything for me that has the capacity to heal should be recognized. And it doesn't have to be an injection or an X-ray or a diagnosis of some sort by a medical professional, because I know people who are healed and very successful and rebounded in their lives, who have been through a lot that many people would just quit by what they've been through. And it was not through the help of necessarily a therapist or a psychotherapist or anything like that. It was through their own logic, their own resilience, their own finding of ways, whether that was in writing or whether that was in dance, or many times I find it's through mediums of art that they find an outlet, and meditation and certain things that allow them to grow. Now, there are many facets and programs in your model. This grows from what you've been through and how you coped and how you learned. So I call it groundbreaking because, this groundbreaking approach that you have, it teaches participants to harness conflict and the intense emotions. And it becomes a way to achieve empathy and deep connection with, what we think are our enemies. But it's beautiful how you broke down the story from your father, because right away, as a child growing up, I know this firsthand. A lot of people say, as you're growing up, you hear this narrative of Jewish people are bad people, or Muslim people are bad people, or whatever it may be. It could be between other countries, between other cultures, religions, whatever it is. So you grow getting that black and white version and you live by it. But the fact that you understand them as perceived as that, wrong narrative of placing everything in the black and white is part of the groundbreaking, is part of the work. So going into the technicalities of the work, can you tell me what dance movement therapy is, or your listening partnerships, or your healing touch? You did work, the radical aliveness work, the playback theater that you talk about, or the IFS, the internal family systems, correct? Yes, I think that's the one. Yeah. So I've been reading, I've been studying what you've done, and I don't want to, open up parts of your work or your book or anything that require people or the audience to essentially get involved before we get into that conversation. But what I wanted to do here is, speak with you so I can share this with an audience that is looking, like you said, everybody's talking about it, from homes to cafes to workplaces to governments. A lot of people are talking about, how do we find a solution? And here you are with this model. So, run me through very briefly, even, how do you heal from dance therapy? How do you heal from playback theater? What is radical aliveness? So people can start to imagine this canvas that you're painting and start to be like, I can see that, I can see this, and I want to be a part of it.
Okay. So I'm going to go a step back and remind people that the audience, the amazing audience, that our goal, our belief is that pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And so what we're trying to do well, I've been doing it for 30 years because I was doing this before, but what we're doing is creating safe spaces for people to feel and heal. That's what we're doing. And we were using different approaches that we find that work really well together to achieve that, the spaces where you can bring anything you're feeling in the service of healing, and then being able to work together for peace. So that's the what's underlying it all. Mm-hmm. Now, the steps that we did in our program, we quickly understood that we're not going to bring the conflict in first, because people have, before they begin talking about the conflict or arguing or whatever, they have to first connect as human beings. That has to happen first. Because we started working with women, it meant that we found a way to connect women as mothers, as wives, as kindergarten teachers. They began caring about each other. They got to know each other, began caring. Then once they care, once they shared stories, my children, your children, my relationship, they begin appreciating, seeing how much they have in common. Then on that basis of connection, we bring in the conflict. And then what happens is that people are more ready to hear and acknowledge each other's pain, each other's struggles, each other's the injustice that's been done here, because they care about the person, because they know them, because they know she's a human being that is just like them in so many ways. So that's the outside the framework. Now I can go inside and explain each step in this path of what we did inside the workshops. And I'll start, and then you'll tell me if, but I'll start with Together Beyond Words, which is the approach we created. So if you can imagine you're coming into a room that's very comfortable and has mattresses for people to sit and pillows and a carpet, and people are sitting in a circle, and then there's a candle in the center that somebody lights and with an intention for today. And we're all sitting in the circle, and we begin by getting to know each other and each sharing something about ourselves. Usually something that is good and new. What's good and new in your life? So many times we talk about the bad and the old, or just what's not good. But we want people to remember the good and the new. And then every week they have to think, okay, what am I going to say in the beginning for the good and new? And they find more and more things that are good and new in their lives, and more of the positive, because they have to bring it to the group. And after people share something about themselves, and it's so many times so sweet to hear little stories and little, then we usually would get up or sometimes start sitting down and do some movement and dance and music. And the reason we use movement is that it's a much quicker way to access the emotions than words. When we talk, we can say what we feel. We can also hide what we feel. We can lie. We can manipulate. When we're moving, when we're standing up, when we're in our bodies, there's something more direct, more open, something immediately begins to become clearer. And so people are moving together and apart, and they're beginning to remember how much they love to move as children. And we play some games, and energy is starting to flow, and there's energy in the room, and people are feeling things and just feeling connected. And we find a way to kind of transition from that into sitting in pairs around the room. Each person finds a partner, and then they share something about what happened to them in the movement, what it brought up, memories, thoughts, feelings. And we teach them about listening partnerships, where one person is mostly just listening and the other person shares. That doesn't happen a lot in life. I can do an exercise with you around that if you want, but
You can do whatever you want.
so would you be willing to share something like not very deep, not very painful, just like what you had for breakfast or what something you saw this morning or whatever you want? And what I want to demonstrate is how we usually listen to one another in just daily conversations.
I'm not big on breakfast, but I have a banana every morning.
Wow, I love bananas. Aren't bananas just great?
I love them. I have one every morning, like a routine standard, basically in my life. I have one every morning.
I want to stop you for a second. One direction I didn't give is for the audience who are listening to notice every time I'm not really listening to Ali. Just notice it. You'll feel it in your body every time I'm not listening to him, and I'm going to do it in different ways. Just notice it. Okay, go on.
And I have some dates and nuts.
You know that dates and nuts go really well together. You should always have dates with nuts.
I do that in the mornings. And that's it pretty much. And then I was thinking
you know what
of our
I eat in the morning? Let me share with you what I eat in the morning.
Okay.
Also tell me when you're ready to kind of shut me up.
Because you know what? That's a problem. That's gonna be a problem. I see exactly what's happening, but I feel that people have so much need to be heard and so much need to be just loved and hugged in a sense that people do this often. You're doing it as you're intentionally doing it, but people do exactly what you do very often. And what I do is I say, tell me about your day. It could be a story of something drastic that even happened to me. I could walk into an office with a cast on my leg and people say, oh, how did you break your leg? And I'll say, I was skiing. And then just before I start my story, the person will say, oh, I love skiing. You know where I go to ski, and they go on and they go off. And for me, I say, perfect. This is what they need. They need this, otherwise like they would be immersed in my experience, but they can't be immersed in my experience because they have so much baggage they're overflowing with that they need this more than I need it. So let me give them that. So with me, I do that. I just let people have that. And then it goes from that experience of telling me about their skiing into their personal life or that trauma that, that's bothering them or that moment or that experience, the negativity that they want to let out. And then we start talking about that. And I noticed that a lot of people have that. So unfortunately, I will never be like, hey, let's talk about my nuts and dates right now,
Well, but you're a healer. I'm not against this kind of conversation that we just had. I just want to say for a moment that it's very this this happened to me. This happened to me.
Yes.
It's nice to connect to people in that way, but it's not the kind of listening that's healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was doing with you, Ali, I was like asking questions that are not related. Like, why do I need to know that, making suggestions, you've got to eat the nuts with the dates while you were talking, or I was telling my own story. Let me tell you what I had for breakfast. These are things that when you listen, when we were teaching people how to listen, we told them, so you're going to get your turn. The time is divided half and half. While you are listening, just focus on the person and just be there for them. Remember their heart, remember their gold inside them, and see if you can connect to that as you listen. And if you do ask a question after they share their story, it can be not things that will take them out of their pain or their fear or whatever they were saying, but things that will help them go deeper. Like, what was the hardest for you? What was the most painful about what you're sharing? Tell me. And that allows people to like relax for a moment and just go in.
And lower the wall.
Exactly.
Yes, I feel you completely on that. And you know what? I'll tell you this part of what I should tell you as my experience. So you can, it really relates to everything you do. I learned inclusivity from a Jewish woman. Um, she was a survivor. She was a very small baby at the time, though, and they moved to Canada after being, they survived and being in a camp, and then they moved to Canada. When I went to school, I met a friend, Ross. He was in class with me, and this is me coming from being born in Dubai, raised in a place where there were no Jewish people or Jewish or understanding of Judaism at all, because it was not at the time. Like you said, we lived in a different era, and it wasn't taught. We didn't know it existed. All we knew is that it's bad for some reason, for no reason, because also growing up as a Muslim, so you read the Quran, and there's so many stories of Moses, yet somehow Jewish people were bad, but you don't understand that as a child. You just take what comes. And then growing up in boarding schools, also I didn't have the interactions with Jewish people because there weren't any there. So I never learned. I moved to Canada to go to university, and here is a complete culture shock for me in every way, because where I went to school, during exam times, 2 or 3 teachers would walk up and down the rows of separated tables so we don't cheat. And we were masters of trying to cheat because everything was about getting the grade. It wasn't about learning, it was about getting the grade. And now I go to Canada, and I remember my first exam, the teacher put the papers on the desk, and he said, "I'll be back in an hour to collect them, just leave them on the desk." And he walked out, and I grabbed a paper like everybody else. And I sat down and I looked around. Nobody's opening the books. Nobody's cheating. No, what's going on? Everybody's stupid, because I'm going to take my book out and I'm going to get 100% on this exam because the teacher's not here. And slowly I had to learn so many different things, so many things about morality, ethics, and whatnot. So one of my first friends was Jewish, and it was my first experience with Jewish people. And I went to their home and I saw they have 2 kitchens. They were wealthy. I saw they have 2 kitchens, and I said, "Why do you have 2 kitchens?" And so the grandma, started teaching me, and she said, "This is a kosher kitchen." And I said, "What's a kosher kitchen?" And these are all new words to me. The word kosher itself was never heard of in my life. So I learned so much from her, right? And like you said, I started relating and seeing a human speaking to me, and not this devil with horns that I was taught, stay away from Jewish people or things like that. And then she did this exercise with me, which was amazing. She took a piece of paper one day, because I was ready to conflict. I was ready to argue. I was ready to say, "But Islam says this, but blah," and fight with her. And she realized I had that anger, or I had this, not even an anger, but I had this problem of, I was taught this all my life. How are you coming and telling me it's different? She took a piece of paper. She wrote my name, A, capital L, capital I. And she said, if the horizontal line on the L, if we just make it a little more vertical, if we put an angle to it, you know what it becomes? I said, and she did it. And I said, "It's a V." And she said, "It says Avi." And I said, "Yes." She said, "So if I call you Avi, by just shifting the letter a little bit, you become an Israeli. And all of a sudden, you are this completely new human being with a new history, with a new culture, with a new religion, with a new attachment, with a new family who may have suffered, with so much more that just changed with just a move of a line on a piece of paper. So are you really this piece of paper here that they forced on you, or can you be all of these? Because I'm ready to feed you in my kosher kitchen as Avi." And everything became, very metaphysical at that point for me. I started thinking, God, like, yeah, what is this? And so that's when I just realized, like what you're doing right now, and why I'm so attracted to your work, because you are doing and creating and formatting the system that a lot of people are starting to understand themselves in a way, going through so much that at the end of the day, we have commonalities that we can build on instead of the fake narratives and propaganda that we're building on for no reason. It does not take us anywhere. There's no advancing in that. And the narrative, even your childhood story, you said that was a long time ago. It's not. For me, today, the Holocaust as the experience of what it was during World War II that we put a date on is wrong, because I feel it never ended. It still exists today, because I lived in Toronto, Canada, for over 20 years. And in those 20 years, I saw prejudice, and I saw exact prejudice on Jewish communities. It may not have been as violent as the Holocaust, but the thought that it could be violent, the thought that you worry, the thought that there is this false narrative, from Jewish people own the banks, Jewish people are like this, Jewish people are like that, and all these, right now in this conflict, let's boycott Starbucks. These whole narratives that pop up with no foundation. I mean, Starbucks is not financing a terrorist organization called the State of Israel, that we are boycotting Starbucks so that it helps the Palestinian cause. There's no connection. But Starbucks's stock is losing ground. So there is traction, unfortunately, right? But there's no connection. So I started seeing through those lines, and I started noticing. And when I went out with some of my friends who were Orthodox Jewish, and now you can tell directly that this is a Jewish person, I saw how people looked, how people judged, how people said something, and I started realizing we live in a false narrative. And part of what you're doing that really makes me dedicated to what you're doing is I never learned how to solve that. I never learned how to deal with that. I only learned to myself as a person to support my friends, not the entirety of the Jewish community, or not the entirety of the problems in Israel, but I learned to help my friends how I could, which really wasn't or isn't enough. And you come here and you say what you're doing, what you learned from your Jewish grandmother, is something that I can do as a program, as a manifestation, as a healing, as a change. And I want to embrace that, because I find a lot of people who have the knowledge that you do, who have the understanding that you do, are not putting themselves in your place to make this a legacy work, not to have a statue of Nitsan Joy Gordon somewhere on a famous roundabout or something like that, but the legacy of bringing back humanity, bringing back love and compassion into the world. And what you say, to transform pain instead of transmitting it is so powerful, so powerful. And I really want everybody to hear this and to be able to connect with it and to be able to be a part of it, because I had this conversation with you outside of today's talk, the global impact of what you're doing, not just Israel and Palestine, because, like you said about racism in America that you experienced because, Black people came to the town that you were in and their houses got burned. And how much has changed today? You say there wasn't BLM today. Well, why is there BLM today? There should not be BLM today, because there should not be this problem that causes BLM to exist. So the fact that BLM exists means it's huge. This problem is huge. Can we take Nitsan and replicate her there? Yes. Can we take Nitsan and replicate her between the Greeks and the Turks? Yes, because I have a lot of Turkish friends. I have Greek friends, and I hear in their personal narratives, the jokes, it's just so much building of this hatred in the communities together. So can you replicate it in so many places between tribes in Africa that I know of? Yes, you can. And really, that's the most important aspect of this. And I say all of this because I want to ask you, obviously, the end goal of Together Beyond Words as a program, a nonprofit, a book, yourself through it, is healing Israel in essence, because as you call it, an army of healers, that's what they're going to do. They're going to come in, and not with band-aids, but they're going to come in with healing. You know, the band-aid healing is not what works, and you're not doing that. You're doing the real work, the long-term work, the generational work to stop this, to replicate this everywhere. What do you feel is the starting point for you to begin this work formally, and not in the way you've done it in the last 30 years? Because many people in the audience will say, well, it didn't work. Why? Because I listened to Nitsan, and she talked about her work for 30 years and nothing's happened. Look at the conflict. October 7 happened. So obviously it didn't work, right? That's what they'll say, but it's not true. If you get to know Nitsan, you understand that she was doing the work at a different level, at a different scale, at a different organizational level. And now the catalyst of bringing this global solution of healing emotionally to the world, unfortunately, was October 7 and the events that happened. That is what catapulted this whole discussion. Our meeting, everything came from that unfortunate, catastrophe. But we're going to take that unfortunate catastrophe and we're going to turn it into a manifestation of trying, at least, to make sure that it never happens again. So where does Together Beyond Words start, and what would be the end goal, in the sense of where are you satisfied that you can say, I'm happy now to leave this in the hands of the universe?
Oh, another good question, and a beautiful story about the letter in your name. Wow. So there's a story about a man who's walking. You've probably heard it, but maybe some people in the audience haven't. He's walking along the beach and he sees all these stars. Or what do you call it? It's a sea animal that's starfish that's
Yes.
been washed ashore, and he knows that if they stay on the beach, they'll die. So he just picks one up and throws it back in the water, and then walks some more, picks another one and throws it back in the water. And coming across from the other side of the beach, another man walks up to him and says to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm just trying to save these starfish by throwing them back in the water." And the other man says, "But there's so many of them. I've just been all the way to the other side, and it's huge. You're never going to be able to do anything here. It really doesn't matter." So what you're doing. So the first man bends down, picks up another starfish, throws it into the water and says, "It mattered to that one." And so for many years, we did work that didn't matter on a really universal, national level even. It was just going back to the sea, just a drop in the sea. It mattered to people who were in it. It changed their lives. And then because of that, many things that they were doing changed. But it wasn't big enough. It didn't make enough of a dent. It didn't make enough of a difference. But can you imagine if, like, with the same story, if there were 1,000 people walking on the beach and just throwing back the starfish and saving them? I think that's where we're going now. That's what we're trying to do. We realize that, yes, we made a difference in people's lives, but not enough. it mattered, but on an international level or even on a small national community level, it's not enough. Our work is amazing. Our work is powerful. Our work is life-changing. Now we need to scale it up. And so what we'd like to do in 2024 is have, instead of 3, 4, 5 circles, have 100 circles of healing, 100 safe havens where people can come and feel and heal using different approaches that we have used over the years. And so basically, that's the first step in scaling up our program. And this is what we're trying to get the funding for. This is what we're trying to do. And, you know, Israel is such a small country. It's the size of New Jersey, basically. It has a population of 9 million. But you hear about it in the news like it was China, because there's something here that's so, like, that affects so many people around the world. You know, major place for 5 world religions, maybe. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is. A place like where all traffic has to go through from the east to the west, whatever. I don't know exactly. But that's the fact right now in the world. And can you imagine if there's real change here, real shift, if there's peace that's beginning to happen here, what kind of effect it will have on the rest of the world? So yes, this is what I would like to hand over to the universe, or I don't know how you said it, but something like that.
No, you said it perfectly. And you know what? You're right. Over the last few years, I mean, speaking of recent history, there was the Abraham Accords, and countries such as the UAE, where I was born, now have a so-called peace treaty, a recognition with the state of Israel. And so, Israelis came to Dubai. And I remember when that first happened, there was a little bit of tension, not physical or anything like that. There was tension in the way of worrying, how will people react? Will there be conflict? Will someone hit them or attack them? Or, it was very cautious. The first trips were very cautious. And I would assume it was like that from the Israeli side too, to make sure that the first tourists that land, aren't harmed, or it just ruins a lot of discussions and talks on the political level, right, on diplomacy. So, but then a beautiful thing happened, and I noticed it's because of leadership. The beautiful thing that happened is because the leaders of the UAE embraced the Jewish community in the UAE, the people of the UAE love their leadership because they've been so good for them. I mean, we're talking a country that was literally a desert 50 years ago to what it is today, not just in the opulence, not just in they have the tallest tower and everybody drives a luxury car or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the comforts that they have, the security that they have, the safety in the country, the comfort for a woman to walk at night in the street and not have the same worries that any woman walks in any part of New York City at night alone. So there's so much that you can be grateful to the government here. And in that sense, they followed the footsteps of the government in that embrace. And it opened up such a communal embrace, in a sense, that, you don't have this so-called fear. And the policy is very important because the government makes sure that you're reprimanded for showing any of that. And so there's no extremism, and there isn't any of that sense when you travel in Dubai, and you can notice that there isn't that sense of that feeling that you would feel in other places. So I think the possibility of having 100, 1,000, 10,000 of your circles, of your healing circles, will have a huge impact on society in general and people's interaction and the way they treat each other and the way they are protesting against violence and the way they want love to emerge. But I think it also requires a policy shift on all sides, on all players, to say, yes, we are ready to embrace that. We are ready for some kind of resolve to this, right? I mean, we're talking about literally, I really wish anybody to correct me if I am wrong. There isn't a continually live conflict throughout our history than Jerusalem, so to speak. And, you know, these solutions that have been passed around for the last 50 years are not resolutions that anybody wishes to embrace, because like you correctly say, and you know, you put your finger exactly on where the troubled beat is, where it is out of sync, out of harmony. The music is not harmonious. You touched exactly on that note, and that note is people are not yet willing to embrace each other and love each other. So if they are not willing to embrace and love each other, how are we going to write laws and regulations that define or identify with this love if we don't have it? So starting with what you're doing and starting with the community, I hope that this can grow on a state level, like you said, on a national level, so that there can be resolve and there can be change. And in that, I want to ask you, have you ever thought about how Together Beyond Words transitions from Nitsan and a few people, as you have, helping one starfish, versus Nitsan going to the government and saying, look, there's a beach here, there are many starfish. I can only clean 10% of them every morning on my jog, but if you give me this tool, or if you empower me in this way, I can clear maybe 9,000 out of the 10,000 that are there. Like you said, to scale it in a much larger capacity, which then creates the beach that everybody loves. And in this example, the policy may create the world that everybody can compassionately relate to. Because when I hear stories or, you know, signals of the two-state solution or some of the other aspects, I keep thinking more segregation, more future conflict, more continuous problems, because we are suppressing the problem. You create a two-state Israel and Palestine, and some Palestinians or some Israelis are going to say, that was our land and they took it from us and we're not happy about that, and we're going to wage a war now and go back and try to take over that state. This is exactly what will transpire in the future, because nobody learned to be compassionate. Nobody learned to see each other as humans. They have a border now that they wish to create a wall and never see each other and hate each other for the rest of eternity. That's not a solution. How do you think your work can be impactful taking it to the state?
Well, it's a process. And since October 7th, there's been a breakdown in trust, both between Israelis and Palestinians, Arabs and Jews. If before it wasn't such a huge issue, now it's a huge issue. In order to have the kind of country, or I don't know if even to call it a country, it may not even be a country, but a place where people can exist together harmoniously, you need to begin rebuilding trust. Any community falls apart when they're like fear, when people are afraid of each other. Any sense of harmony is damaged when there's fear. Safety, existential fear. So the first step, which is what we're going to be doing, is to create places where trust can be reestablished. Now, on a state level, I'm not sure the current government, as it is, can take this, make this move to rebuild trust with our Palestinian neighbors. Not on that side and not on that side. And like, it's not, something has to shift. So I believe it needs to come from a ground roots level of people, of enough people. You know, there's when there's enough people, when it's the tipping point, there's a tipping point when enough people can trust each other and feel good about living next to each other and connect and have heard and have shared stories and have worked through their fears, then there'll be a possibility of what you are talking about. And it's going to be a process that has different, like, it's going to be in steps. One step, and the next step, and the next step.
And what you're describing is a social and emotional and healing revolution that happens through steps, essentially, because what you're saying is we need to start in our own home, in our own neighborhood, in our own surrounding people of different backgrounds.
Towns and cities.
Yes, and then grow that exactly to towns and cities and districts. And slowly, with time, those people who are healing will be people running for office. There will be people running for government and running for the presidency and all the political offices. And they will bring with them this new perspective of, we're looking at the world this way now. And so that will start making the change. And there's a theory, it has a lot of merit, that you need to win over about 4% of your population to make change in your population. So if Together Beyond Words can do, 5% of the 9 million population of Israel.
Well, 9 million, we're talking about the adult population, so it's less than that.
Right. So less than that even, and which makes it easier. If you are able to touch about 5% of that population in your initial growth of that, the first step of all the steps, growing into that significant number of people, I think there is hope that it grows from there, it ripples from there, essentially, and slowly, it's kind of like your beach example and word of mouth. If that one man and the other man were able to understand that it mattered to that one starfish, and then the other man started throwing starfish in the water, and then somebody else saw them and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're saving lives, and came in, all of a sudden there's 3 times the starfish that are being saved, right? So that's the idea. And it's just a matter of organizing, preparing, funding, and getting this done. And
there's one more thing I want to say.
Yeah.
Israel is a very small country where people know each other. So I'm not, I wouldn't be so surprised if there's people who join the groups who know Knesset members. And then they can be invited and be part of some of what we're doing, and they know other influencers and decision makers, and because it's such a small country, and people have access to one another, and everyone is really in a place where they want to do something now, where they realize something needs to change. So there's more possibility to get to the people who are making the decisions more quickly.
Right. And that's the plus point here, because again, if you were trying to do this in the United States, just being able to have your voice spread will require, millions of dollars just in media to be able to say, hey, I exist. But where you are, like you said, you start with 2 homes, and the ripple effect of the 2 homes, because everybody is so close and everybody is friends and related or what, that ripple effect will happen very quickly. So the real urgency here is to start. And that's why we're here. Compassiviste Foundation is, taking this project on as one of the projects that we work on. And we're trying to get you rolling out the gates. And it's not really by writing a check, so to speak, and fundraising, but it's also being involved. I've tried to be involved with you in developing that format, and I've been, the biggest pain in your organization for the last month, maybe, by pushing you guys to, prepare and create and do so many things that, I bring with me from having experienced this kind of situation and position before. But I really believe, and I think the people in the audience should look at this as a call for compassion. And I don't think anybody is against compassion by their nature. So if they can reach into their nature and see that we are built on compassion as a universal flow of our existence, then we can all come together and really end this forever conflict and bring peace and love to it. So with that, I want to thank you very much for being a Compassiviste Dialogues guest, first of all. Second of all, for allowing Compassiviste to be part of something monumental that you're doing. And also for helping me individually see things from yet another perspective to the experiences that I've had. And it's been beautiful. So thank you for existing, for fighting, for pushing through, for being you. And to all the women that have been doing this with you, I've met some of them, over so many years. And when I met them and when you shared videos of some of the work you did prior, I could see them. Oh, that's her. And she's grown so much and she looks different now. And, it's really a long time to see people doing the work for 20 and 30 years. And, it sticks with you. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And if there were mirrors of you and if there were tons of you around the world, I think the world would be a much more harmonious place to be living in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, we pray for peace. Goodbye, everyone.